Welcome and good evening. My name is Cindy Price and I am the Vice Provost for Academic Affairs, and I am just here tonight to give you greetings, and really particularly for you students, delighted that you are here given the weather outside. It is really nice out there and maybe it will hold off. But really we are here for an important event and the annual lecture for talking about issues of deep importance to us, titled No Limits, No Boundaries. I think about tonight's lecture coincides with the 25th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and I was reflecting back to that time. I was somewhat recently out of college, and I'm thinking particularly about language and how the language of disability was prevalent in the culture, and more importantly, how it has shifted today. True, we still hear the language of disability, but we are more likely to hear the language of ability. And while people with those different abilities truly benefit, it might well be the culture as a whole that has benefited most in the last 25 years. And we have been able to see and be a part of the gifts that so many people have to offer. So tonight we welcome you. We welcome this conversation of important topics. We hope it will be a fruitful conversation for each and every one of you, so enjoy. We will begin the evening with three student presentations, and I believe they will come forward and start us off this evening. Thank you so much for coming.
Hello, my name is Garrett. I'm a junior here at Seattle Pacific University, and I am majoring in business administration, international economics, and global development studies, so that's super fun. I'm also severely dyslexic, reading in the 1 to 3 percentile on reading speed. I found that out my senior year of high school. Growing up, I always knew that reading especially just took me longer in homework, but I was homeschooled, so I was really sheltered from kind of how much dyslexia actually affected me in comparison to everyone else that I knew. And so it was really when I went into high school that I quickly realized how much longer assignments took me than my fellow classmates. My teachers would tell us, hey, here's a half an hour reading to do that for tomorrow, yet it would take me 2 to 2.5 hours. So that was really a discouraging time. And I needed to I reached a point where I had to make a decision of how I was going to react. I could either use dyslexia as an excuse and a reason just to not try and to give up, or really take it as a challenge and work really hard to just put myself on the level of everyone else. So I did. I worked hard. I learned to have a really, really good work ethic from a pretty young age. I did well in school. It took me a whole lot longer than all my classmates, but I was able to do well. And also, rather than be embarrassed about being dyslexic, I chose just to embrace it as part of who I was. Although pretty much everyone in my school was subjected to my attempts of reading over the loudspeaker because I was the class president and the ASSP president, and that was part of my role. So it was a very public knowledge. I decided not to try to get out of that, but just to accept it, and everyone knew that that was part of me. I went to my graduation speech and walked up and shuffled my papers and then said, who am I kidding? We all know this isn't going to help me. Using it as little notes right now, but clearly I was going to read and I'm not anymore because it doesn't actually work very well. Generally, by accepting my lack of ability to read out loud or read quickly, and focus on the things that I am good at, I've learned to not be ashamed of those that I'm not. About halfway through my high school experience, I was first introduced to my first accommodations. I started getting audiobooks, and that was a huge step where I realized, oh my gosh, I can get some of these things done. So I actually ended up starting to I took advanced placement English classes just to try to prepare myself for college. But I was still, even having taken those classes, I was really worried about what it was going to be like actually coming to school. I was really worried that I'd be overwhelmed with the workload and I wouldn't be able to pass. I really had this goal of, okay, just get into school, I can just pass my classes and graduate, get out with a degree. That's all I want to do. But essentially, after showing up to SPU, realizing that the work ethic that I had developed and the amazing resources that I've got from the Center for Learning with extended time on testing and audiobooks and digital copies of just about anything that I'd need to read have actually enabled me to not only pass my classes but really excel. Hence the triple major and deciding to stay here for a 5th year, thinking that was a good idea. So ultimately, disabilities are diverse, and the process of dealing with them is unique to each person, and it can be a learning experience if you really just understand that process. By increasing our understanding about them, we can turn something that the world sees as a weakness into a strength. And I really do believe that because of my dyslexia, I've learned to work hard. I've learned to work with the Center for Learning. I earlier tonight realized I had a book that I didn't see on my syllabus that I need to read by tomorrow. Chopped it, scanned it, turned it into a PDF that's readable, and that's what I'll do as soon as I leave here tonight. So essentially just learning to use the resources that we have and make them as effective as possible. So thank you very much.
Oh, okay. This is very intimate.
So, what does disability mean to you?
Disability?
Disability.
Disability means to me, I don't shoot. That's tough.
Can I start over?
Oh, wow. You really got me there.
Disability is physical, mental, something that society views you as you're not able to function as well.
Disability means really anything that interferes with your normal day-to-day life.
It means your life is harder.
Like a lot of times when I think of disability, I think of something that's happened to someone that, that they didn't intend to happen to them in their life. They're maybe born with a disability, and they have to work through that the rest of their lives. So they have to make the necessary sacrifices and changes throughout their day and their lives to accommodate like what has happened to them.
Right. Or an accident that's happened. Maybe like a war veteran, something like that along those lines. Essentially someone who needs help through daily things in life.
So I work in wellness and health promotion over at Seattle University. Really, it's about making things accessible for all diverse populations, and that does include all types of disabilities and all types of folks who deserve to have the same right as everyone else.
Disability means that someone isn't able to do things the way that most people can.
Hi, my name is Amanda Banks. I'm a first-year student here studying exercise science, and I wanted to share with you just a little bit of my story and some of the reflections that I had. Since I was little, I struggled with reading, and I loved books, but I hated reading, and I didn't really understand why. And getting into high school, like Garrett, I felt like the one to be the last one to finish a homework assignment or the very last person to hand in their test. And that was very frustrating and really struggled with why is this happening. And my junior year, I found out that I was dyslexic. And my first response to that was, yes, this is wonderful. This is great. This is like, oh, it makes so much sense, all this stuff I've been frustrated with and the struggles that I've been having. But my second response was quieter and unspoken. It was the doubt, kind of self-doubt of, if high school is this hard, like, how am I going to do college? How am I going to tackle that challenge? And while going through that kind of like anxiety, I had been already experiencing depression and just those kind of struggles. And so I wrote a little, or let me rewind. This year, I kind of experienced a very like great switch in those like depressive feelings and things going backwards, and really having like a revelation. And so I wrote this short piece kind of to express that and what the change was like and what it was like before. So it's called Merely 3. I am alive today because God gave me a mental slideshow, a flipbook of pictures filled with people who loved me. This barrage of faces followed every serious suicidal contemplation, and at this time, it felt like shackles, trapped between bars of depression with one small escape route, the one sliver of possible relief from complete enclosure, snapped shut as I considered the hearts of family members, friends, coaches, and classmates. Panic thrummed a wild beat as I gripped the bars with hatred in my eyes and the taste of injustice in my mouth. But thank God, soft words drifted through the barricades and quieted the ball of anxiety raging in my soul. For years, the door swung open and banged shut. Whoosh, bang, whoosh, bang, whoosh, bang, whoosh, bang. Slowly, words like tender hands squeezed through the iron bars. Ever so gently, they turned my shoulders, and with them my body. Finally, I lifted my eyes, and my soul sang with joy like sunlight. All this time, I had been clinging to angry walls, and there were only 3. Thank you.
I am Allie Steenis. I am a sophomore at Seattle Pacific University. I'm a business management major with the hope of going on to receive my master's in social and sustainable management. I'm a competitive horseback rider who aspires to compete internationally in dressage on the United States Paraequestrian team. I am a follower and believer in Christ who desires every morning to be nothing more than his hands and feet. But all of these pieces of my identity are automatically stripped away from me when one word is brought into the conversation. I am also blind. Why is it that one word has the power to minimalize every other piece of my identity? Why is it that when I walk down the street with my guide dog Wesley, I am over and over again asked, "Are you training that dog for a blind person?" Because there's no possibility, obviously, that I could be blind, actually blind. As if blind people are some kind of elusive Sasquatch creature that simply avoid social interaction. Society tells us blind people to return to our bat cave with our cane-wielding, braille-reading blind pals. I'll be totally honest with you. This isn't going to work for me. I have way too much to accomplish in this life to stay within the bounds that society wants to put me in. Too much to do in this life to stick in the box that I'm expected to be in. Now, all of us have some form of disability. Whether it's a gluten allergy that keeps you from eating cake at your best friend's wedding, all of us have some form of disability. Mine just happens to be something that prevents me from driving a car, but maybe not for much longer. And I think that all of us know in our hearts that these things do not restrict us from doing what we want to do, and they definitely do not define us. I believe that instead of being defined by these minuscule things that impact our lives, but don't define us, we should be defined and identified by the way in which we choose to live our lives. Let us not shy away from what we don't understand. Let us not identify people by things that they don't identify themselves with. And let us not let society put us in these societal boxes. I'll leave you with words from my homegirl, Helen Keller. Never bend your head, hold it high. Look the world straight in the eye. Thank you.
really glad to see everybody here. This is a great turnout. Thank you. Let's give our students, amazing SPU students, one more round of applause. So we're really proud and excited to have Cyrus here for our first annual event of its kind. This is a long time in coming. As the disability coordinator here at SPU, I've had a lot of conversations hidden behind the doors of my office, and a lot of students here tonight that are wanting to have this conversation more openly. So I'm so glad to see so many of you here, and we're in for a great treat. Cyrus, at just the age of 8, he lost his eyesight due to cancer. But nonetheless, he went on to become a black belt karate, a jazz pianist, a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford, an editor of the Law Review at Yale, and an attorney at a prestigious Seattle law firm. At just 33 years old, he is now Washington State's first blind lawmaker in more than 50 years. His life story is in many ways reflected in the policies he's now advocating for. He's a great example of how he did not allow his disability to become a limitation or a boundary. It is with great excitement that we have the privilege of hearing from Mr. Habib tonight. And at the conclusion of his talk, we will have a time for Q&A. We'll have a podium and a mic, so please come up to that podium to ask your questions of Cyrus. Please welcome Mr. Cyrus Habib.
Thank you. Thank you all. It's so good to be here with you. Thank you for the tremendous honor of being able to speak to you at your first annual disability. Are we No Limits, No Boundaries conference? I can't promise a speech that will be remembered for years and years to come, but I can tell you it's going to be better than this speech has been in previous years, okay? The only promise I can make. But no, it is truly such an immense honor to have this chance to talk to you all. And I do hope this is just the beginning. I know we're going to do Q&A tonight, but I hope that we can continue this discussion. I'm right here in town, so I want to be a resource and a friend to the university and to you all as you discuss these things and build what I hope will be a lasting culture of support for people of all abilities and disabilities. I want to, rather than focus on my entire life story, which sometimes I do at speeches like this, I want to leave as much time for Q&A. So I'm just going to tell you a few episodes from my life that maybe we can use as a frame to understand me and my relationship with having a disability. I think it's kind of helpful to understand my background. My parents came to the United States in the 70s from Iran. My dad came to go to the University of Washington in 1970. My mom came later in the decade to go to law school at the University of Maryland. And I was born in Baltimore. And I considered myself lucky to have been born in Baltimore, which is not something you hear all that often, especially these days. But I'll tell you, I was lucky because having been diagnosed with retinoblastoma, which is a rare form of childhood cancer of the eye, I was able to get some amazing medical attention at Johns Hopkins. And they were able to save my life, but unfortunately not able to save my eyesight. And so I became completely blind at age 8 after my second bout with cancer. And, you know, I often like to joke that that was in 1989 when I lost my eyesight. So all 8 years that I was able to see took place in the 1980s, meaning all my visual memories are still from the 1980s, which means like everyone in this room still looks like Boy George and Cyndi Lauper from some MTV throwback. My family moved here to the Seattle area shortly after that happened, and the first episode I want to tell you about took place shortly after that. I was in 3rd grade at Somerset Elementary School in Bellevue, and the kids, in every elementary school, kids like to go out at recess time and play on the jungle gym and the monkey bars and the weird playground equipment. And so my school was no different. All the kids would go out, rain or shine, and play in the playground. And I think knowing that I had just become blind, and probably more importantly, knowing that my mom is a lawyer and a litigator, even worse, the school was not thrilled about me playing with the other kids on the jungle gym 5 feet off the ground. So they kept me by the side of the school. They kept me with the recess ladies, the recess monitors, I think is the more politically correct term, by the side of the school while the other kids were playing. And so, anyone who knows about having a disability or having fought, a disease like cancer or something, or even something as simple as moving across the country, let alone all three of those combined, can understand how isolating it was day after day to be denied that access to my peers and to just simple recreation. So I went home, I told my parents what had happened. My parents were as indignant as I was, and my mom took me with her to the school the next day so that I could learn how to become an advocate for myself. And I'll never forget this, she went to the school and she went to the principal. She said, I'm going to teach my son. I'm going to take him to your school on the weekends. I'm going to teach him how to get around the playground. I'm going to teach him how to get around the jungle gym. He's going to learn it as well as any other kid knows it. She said, it may happen. It may happen that he may slip and fall. And it may even happen that he may slip and fall and break an arm. That's a fear that any mother has. And then she said, I can fix a broken arm. I can never fix a broken spirit. That was the first and central lesson for me of how I was to proceed. This was just a few months after I became blind. And you heard Ali talk about this, and you heard, and by the way, I just want to say, nothing I'm able to say is as poetic as what we heard from Garrett and Ali and Amanda. Can we give them one more round of applause? I think. But, you heard them describe that. You heard them describe how this gets at the very spirit. And so the first lesson that I learned was that as strong as the urge is to protect and to shield, and this is a Christian university, so there's a very, very compassionate Christian desire to protect and to save and to nurture. But that taken too far, that ultimately can rob us of our own humanity, our own need to go out and take risks and maybe even break an arm, just like any other kid. That's part of being human. It's part of being human to experience the friction of life. And so, I remember a couple of years after that, it was all the kids were going to ski school. They were going up to Ski Acres and Snoqualmie and on the weekends. And so I wanted to do that. My dad wanted me to do that, and so we had to figure out, well, how are we going to do this? So he signed up to be a chaperone for all the kids so that I wouldn't feel bad that my dad was coming with me. So we went up to the slopes, and we'd take the ski lift up, and he'd describe the slope that we were about to ski. And then he'd ski like 15, 20 feet behind me and just yell out, left, right, cliff. And which is a lot like politics. People yelling at you, left, right, cliff, pretty much sums up what's happening in DC and Olympia. It was those things are scary for a parent. It was scary for them to send me to New York City at age 18 to go to college and take the subway on my own, or for me to go to Guatemala on my own to go learn Spanish. Those things are frightening, and I know that as their only child, I know that I was definitely a source of stress for them. But I also know that they understood how important it was that I get out on the playground of life, get up on the jungle gym of life, and take those risks. Second episode in my development comes years later. And I did say on Twitter, I think I tweeted back at Seattle Pacific University's Twitter account and said that I might overshare tonight if I like the audience. So I'm going to overshare just a little bit. So it's not too much. Don't get worried. So I was in grad school. I was over in England going to grad school, and I'd really taken this lesson of the playground to heart by this point, right? And I was really, really of the school of thought that I had to just assimilate as much as possible. And that it was so important to get on the playground that I actually didn't want people to even know that I was blind. Like that story that Ali mentioned about people not knowing that she's blind, I would have loved that, because I was just so eager to fit in. And for it to be a non-issue. And so I remember one night in grad school, and we're at a pub. Oxford's not a dry campus, by the way. So we're at a pub, and we're having some drinks, and these girls come over and they're talking to us, and I can tell that this girl who's talking to me does not know that I'm blind, right? She's saying things like, oh, look at that guy, or she's just kind of saying things, and I'm I'm not saying any, I'm not letting her know either, right? So then she says something like, oh, so I just have to ask you, why are you wearing sunglasses inside? Do you think you're some kind of American hotshot or something like that? And I'm not going to do the British accent, but she says something like, you think, and I was just at this moment, and I just said something like, well, I just part of my outfit or whatever. So, in any case, they left, and whatever. The night went on, and my friend who was with me said, "Why didn't you just say you're blind? Why didn't you just let her know? What's the big deal?" And I said, "Well, I just figured that that would kind of kill the attraction. That would kill the moment. If I said that." And he said, I'm gonna tell you about a book that's gonna completely change your life. Okay? It's not the Bible, but it's another book that'll change your life. It's called The Ant and the Peacock. It's by a British anthropologist named Helena Cronin. And what the book describes is two creatures. Any guesses? The ant and the peacock. And how they have confounded, and I don't feel bad about this is a university, so I'm going to go a little scholastic here. They both have confounded evolutionary biologists for over 100 years because they can't, even Darwin could not figure out the aspects, the two very specific aspects of these creatures, respectively. For the ant, altruism, which I don't have time to get into right now, but it's a whole other discussion. And for the peacock, the idea of beauty, which is a disability for the peacock, right? Because so it turns out when peahens find peacocks with whom to make pea babies, they actually are looking for the more beautiful, brilliant plumage, right? Beautiful, brilliant, multicolored feathers that, and whereas in nature, obviously, that would be, the whole name of the game when you're in the state of nature is camouflage, right? You're not trying to stand out, unless you're at the head of the food chain. So they couldn't understand, why doesn't she go for the camouflage one so her babies will be safer? Well, it turns out that this is her theory, okay, but I choose to believe in it, as the amateur anthropologist that I am. But that there is something about resilience. There's something about having a no limits, no boundaries approach to life, of overcoming, of living to a certain, frankly, living to a certain age, despite the disability in nature, is itself a trait that is sexually selected for by the peahen. And he was absolutely right, and what he said was, my friend said, this is the point. You need to not be ashamed that you're a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford but that you're blind, but you should be proud that you are and that you're blind, and that's gonna be the source of attraction, not just for women, but for employers, for law schools, for anybody. I mean, maybe even for you guys as you thought about who to invite here tonight, right? So it's not something to be ashamed of. It can be a source of pride because people look at you and say, okay, you've managed to do these things. All right, so that's the second kind of episode, right? So I went from one extreme to another extreme, and then trying to modulate to get to some sort of more productive understanding of what it means to have a disability. Which gets me to, and I'll just very briefly describe my first, which gets me to advocacy, because it wasn't until I became an advocate, which then laid the groundwork for me running for the legislature, that I really truly understood what tremendous power we have as people who care about this. So I was in law school, my first year of law school. Wireless was like brand new then that year, and so all the kids would sit in law school in class and like G-chat and be on Facebook and whatever while class was going on. And so I was, and I have software on my computer that reads what's on the screen. And so I had I had one little earbud in, and I'm listening to whatever it was I was listening to. And I went to the New York Times website while I'm in a class called Civil Procedures. It's so boring. And I decided I'm going to go to the New York Times website to just see what's in the news. And so I find this article about a lawsuit that's being brought by the American Council of the Blind against the U.S. Treasury Department, alleging that U.S. currency, the bills that we use, $5 bills, $10 bills, $20 bills, are discriminatory because they cannot be denominated, they can't be distinguished by blind and low vision Americans, and they are a public service, they are public good. And this really resonated with me because I just moved back from England where, as in every other industrialized country, bills are distinguishable. So I was really fascinated. I went to the law school dean and I said, I really want to get involved with this in some way, and he helped me get involved. I went and found what's called a friend of the court. I found like an uninvolved party and decided to represent them and write a brief. And the point that I made was, this is how I became an advocate, was what I stumbled upon was this idea that, okay, I think we all understand that it's not fair. If I go to Starbucks, for example, and I'm not picking on Starbucks, just using it as an example. If I go to Starbucks and I buy a cup of coffee and I give them a $20 bill and they give me back as change 4 pieces of paper, right? Then I'm hoping that those 4 bills are 3 5s and a 1, but I don't know it, right? So I think that the blind consumer is something that was kind of the point of this lawsuit. But what I realized was that, you know what's even more pernicious than the blind consumer being shut out? What about the person on the other side of the cash register? What about the fact that nearly all entry-level jobs in this country require the ability to tell one bill from another, to be able to make change? And that all those jobs were being blocked off to people who were blind and low vision. And if you block off entry-level jobs, you make it that much harder for someone to get their next job. And that might explain why in 2007, this is before the downturn, there was a 70% unemployment rate among blind and low vision Americans of working age. 70%, that's before the downturn. So that was the argument that I made. We were very fortunate that it won over. It had the added benefit of being an argument that a conservative judge would like, because it was all about, hey, let's get people to work, right? Rather than like staying at home on Social Security. Like this way they can go out and work, they want to work. And you know what? We did get a conservative vote on the bench that we needed, and we won that case in federal appellate court. And I went to Congress, and I'll just say this as an aside, that then you'll wonder why this has not yet happened. And that's because there's politicians in the world. And I teach a whole class on this, but I'll just say I went to Congress and the whole debate was about, well, how can we change the currency? The vending machine lobby of all people showed up in opposition to changing currency. And the best proposal I heard was, well, why don't we just cut different numbers of corners off the bills so that we can know without changing the shape of the bills? Which I just love, because I love Congress being honest about cutting corners. So these 3 episodes, I just wanted to say, this is kind of how I came to my No Limits, No Boundaries understanding, which is first, it's important to have the opportunity to go out there and take risks and not be over-sheltered and locked, or kept by the side of the school. It's important to, in trying to fit in, not turn away from a very critical aspect of one's identity in hopes that it'll just go away. And then once you balance those two, which is, it took me, 26, 7, 28 years at that point. But once you do that, then how do you take that understanding and allow it and in such a way that you're allowed to go out and make the world a better place for other people, either with that same disability or with different abilities or disabilities. And they could be very small things like changing currency, a little pocket of injustice, or they could be bigger things like making sure that we have transit so that that's adequate so that people can get to and from work if they have a disability. Making sure that we have schools with small enough classes that teachers can teach kids with all different sorts of needs without having them pulled out and taken into a different room. Making sure that access to technology is there so that when a person wants to start their own business or go work somewhere, they can get the adaptive technology they need. And what I want to close on is that as we do these things, we make that move from a kind of personal reconciliation of what it means to live with various abilities and disabilities to the more public service and public-minded and mission-oriented work that you all are going to do, I'm positive, here on campus and out in the community. I would say the most important thing to keep at the center of what you do is tremendous gratitude, which has taken me so long to cultivate myself. I'm an only child and a Leo. I was born in the year of the rooster, and gratitude and humility were not the first virtues that came to me. But here's the thing, okay? The easiest thing in the world for me to do would be to stand up here and tell you guys, after that nice introduction, you know what? I did do all those things. I did win a Rhodes Scholarship. I did go to Yale. I did all those things. I am a state senator. And you know what? I did them all on my own. Did that make me feel great? And I think there's a ton of my colleagues in the legislature and in politics, I won't mention which party, but there are some who will say people ought to be able to do it themselves. This is, it was after all, it was the Declaration of Independence. Well, I think a more true name for it would have been the Declaration of Interdependence. Because I know that as easy as it would be for me to stand up here and tell you that I did it all on my own, the only problem is I know it's not true. I knew if it weren't for the Department of Services for the Blind teaching me how to use a cane, I think that means I'm out of time. But if it weren't for that, then I wouldn't have learned how to use a cane. If it weren't for the state school for the blind where I used to go down and get trained on software, I wouldn't be able to use my computer. And if it weren't for the Washington Talking Book and Braille Library, I would have never learned to read. If it weren't for teachers in public schools, I would have never been able to go from Braille to Yale. So I have tremendous gratitude, and if we do that, if we put that at the center of our work, if we remember, as the sign on I-5 says that I love so much, it says, you're not stuck in traffic, you are traffic, that we are all beneficiaries of tremendous work that's been done by others, then we can pay it forward to others. So I want to leave you with that. As you take tonight as the beginning of this mission, let's take disability awareness and turn it into disability action. I want to be with you as you do all of that. Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
My name's Mary Peterson, senior at Seattle Pacific University. My question is about the viral video that's going around about the 29-year-old woman that hears for the first time. And I wanted to hear how you think of the video, if you think that individuals that have disabilities need fixing or things like that.
So of course the first question is asking about like something I don't know about. So I don't know. I don't know that YouTube video. But I think the question was well framed, so I can struggle through. So let's think back to the most famous instance of blindness in the New Testament, right? What does Christ do, right? He sees a blind beggar. And what does he do? He heals him. He doesn't say. So I mean, the most important thing that he does at the beginning is says, neither you sinned nor your parents sinned. Okay. So that was important because still to this day in many parts of the world, it's viewed as some either karmic retribution or payback for a sin. But then he heals this guy, right? Like actually opens his eyes, like literally, right? And it's supposed to stand there for as kind of figurative enlightenment. He sees the risen, he sees Christ doing this work. Well, what that's done, I mean, what that speaks to a desire, I think, in all of us to understand that these disabilities, these physical, impairments of various kinds, whatever term you want to use, these challenges are things that kind of naturally we want to make better. And I am of the mindset, this is me personally, that like if someone were to come and give me a pill, someone would say like, there's a pill that would allow you to see again, would I take it? I would 100% take it. I don't think for 1 second that like this is, I won't give this aspect of my personality enough like merit or honor it to the point that I would say without, it's not like a sexual orientation. Do you know what I mean? It's not like, it's something that happened because I had cancer. Right? And God willing, we'll cure cancer and people won't get, or will be treated or be vaccinated against it, and no one will have that happen the way it happened to me. Does that mean that I regret my life or that I wish, or that I look back at my life with sorrow? No. I do believe that like the peacock, I have, managed to power through. And that there's something beautiful about that. But that doesn't mean, for me personally, that there's some virtue or honor in kind of carrying this on, if it were possible not to. So that's just my personal view. But it's a very, very personal thing to people, because, and all identity is. And I recommend, by the way, a book to all of you called Far From the Tree. Which came out a couple years ago, and I'm trying to think of the author's name, Andrew, meet somebody. Solomon, thank you, Andrew Solomon, yeah. And it's vast, and you don't need to read all of it, but it's got like a chapter on each of various sorts of, not just disabilities, but horizontal identities, meaning identities that you don't share with your parents necessarily. And he goes into elaborate discussion of this topic, theoretically, of, because people are different. So if you're African American, your parents or biological parents are also African American, your community is likely to be, your extended family obviously is likely to be African American. Like, you're not going to want to not be African American unless maybe you're Michael Jackson. But generally you're not, right? And sexual orientation, while horizontal has its own, has its own aspects that are, I think, more closely tied to identity. Disability, to me, is not like that. It usually originates in some sort of pain or trauma, and so that's just where I'm at.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. I was wondering, what specific laws are you working on now that have to do with your personal story or because of your personal story?
Sure. Well, I'm working on the bill that's kind of nearest and dearest to my heart, but which is the kind of the hardest to do, has to do with cancer research, because I'm a 3-time cancer survivor. My dad is fighting cancer as we speak. And so I have a bill introduced. It's and it's managed to move through part of the legislative process, and has got broad support, but is still going to be challenging, which would raise the cigarette tax by 50 cents to fund basic research in cancer at the Hutch, at UW, at WSU, anywhere. It could be at Seattle Pacific U if you're doing medical research of any type, or even biological research. So that's one that's very important to me. I'm on the Governor's Disability Employment Task Force. We are looking at ways to improve disability employment, both in the public and private sector. I prime sponsored a bill which ultimately passed in a kind of weaker form, but which would allow our state to take advantage of the Federal ABLE Act, which was passed by Congress this last year, which allows tax-free savings for people with disabilities for technology or accommodations of various kinds, without it affecting without that income counting towards Social Security limits. So those are a few, but I'm also very eager to hear from you guys what I could be doing for any of you or for your friends or family members down in Olympia. So if you have better or different ideas, definitely let me know.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have questions? Please feel free to come up.
Okay. Hi, my name is Leah Fox. I'm studying special education here at Seattle Pacific University. My question is if you could give us an example of maybe some accommodations that you had in school to make you so successful, or if you have a story about a teacher that particularly motivated you to be how you are today.
Well, I've got a number of them. In fact, I was just, with my legislative assistant, I was just talking to her about a guy who was one of my orientation and mobility instructors, and they're the people who help you learn how to use a cane, or I suppose, or seeing eye dog to get around, and how all of the mobility instructors that I had before always wanted to teach me how to walk around these like sleepy residential neighborhoods in Bellevue, like near where I grew up, which is like, soul-crushingly boring, right? Like I crossed 143rd Avenue Southeast, but he showed up and he was brand new, and he showed up and he's like, why would we ever do that? I'm gonna take you to Seattle. And we came and we went to like the U District and we went to Capitol Hill, and I just was like, oh my God, this is so funny. And he was from New York. He'd moved here from New York. And he's like, oh, you could absolutely live. He's like, New York is so easy to get around if you have a disability. And it actually is quite easy to get around because there's so much density. There's so many people all around that like, A, everyone's bumping into each other anyway, right? And then B, like everyone's always, the other thing that's very interesting about New York is that there's absolutely no, here we're so like, this is Seattle freeze, kind of awkwardness with people. And New York is like the total opposite. So like in New York, there's absolutely no sense of personal space whatsoever. So like, I remember when I first got to New York, I went to Manhattan, I was walking around and like, the one thing that's a little scary about New York is that all of a sudden there'll be like a manhole where they're like working on something right in the street. So I'm walking and this guy just comes up to me and like physically moves me into a different direction. Like doesn't even say anything, like just like does it, and it's like such a New York thing to do, whereas like in Seattle, like it'd be like 5 people kind of awkwardly, kind of standing there like, well, what do we do? I don't want to like invade your privacy or whatever. So that was like that mobility instructor. But I had another teacher who I'm still in touch with, who I was taking a French class, and he was really into geography and like really into us learning like the geography of France. And so he would like stay, and I kept being like, oh, maybe I'll get out of doing this, because this is like really, it's like the hardest part of the class was like memorize. I still remember to this day these rivers in France, La Dordogne and La Garonne and all these things. I can still, but I was like, maybe I can get out of this. And he was like, there's no way you're getting out of this. He would stay after class and like create these maps with like a glue gun and with like sandpaper and with all these things. Like, you are gonna learn. It was like, for whatever reason, just really important to him that I learned like the mountains and the rivers and the like cities in France. But that was awesome. I mean, it was just awesome to have somebody be like, you're gonna do this, we're gonna figure out a way, just like my mom did on the playground. So those are my kind of best stories.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for your talk. My name is Robin Reedy, and I'm the Assistant Director of Educational Technology and Media. So my office is sort of charged with a little bit of helping with accessible technology, and I'm putting together a resource on universal design for instruction, and hopefully a one-day workshop in the summer for universal design for instruction, which is about helping faculty make their classes more inclusive and accessible for people with all sorts of abilities. And so I was wondering if you have any practical tips as I'm putting together this resource in this workshop.
Oh, geez. I have practical. Well, let me give you like a totally non-practical tip, actually, because so let me tell you why this is like so. I did not use PowerPoint, and I never do. And I'll tell you, I think that there's a trend now, and I don't think it's out of like compassion or like progressive values. I think it's just people are like tired of public speakers who all they do is just kind of like click from frame to frame and then like, just kind of almost like a conductor as opposed to a speaker. And so there's kind of been a move towards just less reliance on that, which I think is a good thing, but I think it also speaks, I think PowerPoint's totally fine. I think it's actually good because I think, the whole point is to do both, right? The whole point is that some people learn better visually and some people learn better orally. And like, it only helps you as a presenter if you can do both of those things. Because there are probably people here who are visual learners who zoned out right around the playground story. You know what I mean? Because it was like, well, he just keeps talking and there's no pictures to look at. That's not bad. That's just how some people learn differently. So I think it's for instruction, I think it's probably, to try to get somewhat practical, I think I would just say, maybe trying to get challenging people to try all types of extremes, doing things just in a collaborative way, doing things in a lecture format, doing things in a visual, with pictures, doing things just spoken word. If you go back to the center of our culture, whether it's the Judeo-Christian tradition, right? What are the first words that God utters? Let there be light, right? Or if you go back to the Greco-Roman tradition, right? Plato and the allegory of the cave, enlightenment, illumination. Visuality is central to our culture. And I've struggled for years because it's always has pride of place. It always has primacy. I've struggled for years to try to say, let's balance that with, the spoken word. There are entire cultures, non-Western cultures, that put that first and foremost. So I think we need to be a little more imaginative, a little more creative, and maybe challenging people who are studying this to experiment a little bit can get there.
Great. Thank you. So we will have just one last question.
My question is regarding church. I wanted to know how your experience has been in the church, if you have any stories to share about that, and what are ways that the church can become more inviting? What instructions would you have for ministers or people of the gospel?
Wait, was I billed as someone who knows about religious life? Because I'm a cafeteria Catholic. Here's what how is the experience going to try? Well, let me tell you one thing is, whenever that gospel reading comes up, which is every year because, we're Catholic, so we have to do things the same way every year. So it comes up, I always feel like incredibly self-conscious because I'm sitting there in St. James Cathedral and there's like, hundreds and hundreds of people. And I'm like, I'm definitely the only blind, or like maybe there's one other blind person, but like I think I'm the only blind person here. Like everyone must be, because it's long. It's like one of the longest gospel passages that's read. So that's really the only time that I think that I've felt, that I ever feel like any level of, self-consciousness. I think that for me, and this is just unique to Catholicism, is that like it is a religion that is very polysensory. Like it is very, they always say smells and bells. There's lots of, there's lots of music, there's lots of incense, there's lots of like theatrics, and like, so I always find it a very like rich experience. I think that even, non-Catholic, even like Protestant or Anglican or Orthodox Christian sects, I think are also, very, very inclined to the spoken word. Because as much as let there be light is the origin, the gospel according to John makes it clear that Christ is the Word made flesh, right? So in the New Testament, it brings it into, right, logos, right, language, and the Word becomes central, which I think is, probably a product of the fact these were Greek people writing in Greek. So anyway, I think that's, I keep wandering into theory because I love being at a university and I get nostalgic for thinking these things. But I think that Christianity, I spoke about this a little bit. I think that what the risk is that in a desire to be radically empathetic, which is, what Christ asks of us, right? Which is to be kind of, radically empathetic with one's neighbor and with everyone. There is a desire, I think there is a tendency sometimes to get into a kind of, to make that empathy, turn that into sympathy. That comes from, kindness, that comes from compassion. But think about my French teacher. There also needs to be that tough love. There needs to be that kind of that sense of, you're just as much a person as I am. You can be a jerk just as much as I can be a jerk. You're a sinner just like I'm a sinner, right? So I think that's something that I've experienced amongst my friends, kind of more devout and some of the older, more devout. Christians is that, they will be so kind, so generous, the first to give a helping hand, but not necessarily as kind of progressive in the way that I think like the ADA generation, and we do celebrate the 25th anniversary this year, that generation views disability. I think it's a little different. So there's definitely work to be done there. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for having me. I'm going to come back to hear the student speakers and your keynote speakers in future years. So I'll just be sitting kind of in the back. But I will always remember that at one point I had given the best speech ever given at this event. So thank you so much. Thank you.
That was fantastic. We are so grateful. Let's give Cyrus another round of applause as he leaves. Thank you all for coming tonight. I hope that our conversation continues. I'm so grateful that we have Allie, Amanda, and Garrett that shared tonight. Amanda and Garrett will be part of our student government next year, so we know that these are conversations that can be had. Personally, I know so many of you in the room have so many thoughts going on, and I imagine that I'll see some of you in my office soon, and I hope that we can maybe move the conversation outside of my office and into the greater population here. Please stick around and look through the exhibit, if you please, tonight. The exhibit will be in Eaton Hall tomorrow and Thursday for you to look at as well, to reflect, write down your thoughts. You can tweet to us or just walk over to the Center for Learning to chat with us. But thank you again for everyone for coming tonight.